Um, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you everyone for joining. It is my great pleasure to actually continue our another session of our monthly webinar series. After a very successful Sial trade show where a lot of Pakistani companies actually got a chance to meet our Canadian side for of buyers. We thought it was very timely and essential to actually inform our community and our people to learn about some of the regulations and some of the ways uh, in order to successfully export and have food products imported into Canada. That being said, we have the great pleasure of having Katerina here, who has 10 years of experience working as a CFIA inspector and a supervisor herself. She now represents Canadian Food Consulting Agency and has volunteered to actually share what are some of the regulations, what are the compliances that go around this category, and most importantly, some of the new changes that are coming about in the industry for product labeling and some of the minor tweaks to the import regulations. She will be sharing with us today, and I'm very excited for all of us to hear also some stories about what she has seen throughout her time at CFIA, and very excited to have that, and also an opportunity to have you guys ask questions about your specific products, your specific needs. So, without further ado, Katrina, I would love to pass the floor to you so that you can actually get started and let us learn about the regulatory updates in the industry.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
It's perfect. Wonderful. So thank you very much for this opportunity to present the smart food importing in Canada. So basically, what are the common mistakes and how to stay compliant? And I know it's not a full screen for the presentation, but I'm not sure how to make it full screen so I can see everybody as well. So I think the slides are big enough, so I'll just roll through it. Now, you have my contact here. There's a website as well if you need to contact me later for any questions. Let me see if I can go to the next.
Yeah. So we can actually share the contact details in the chat.
Sounds good. Perfect. Wonderful. I'm sorry, I just need to figure out how to move to the next one. It actually maybe goes over here. Perfect. Okay. And make it full screen here. So I'm going to go over the agenda, what I'm going to share with you today. And there's a few points that I want to touch upon. And at the end, we'll have a question and answer period as mentioned. So first of all, I want to give you an overview of food import requirements. So as a manufacturer, what do you need to know? And as an importer, if you choose to import, what are the import requirements, right? What do you need to know as an importer? Very important. Some of you may be both, right? Manufacturer and importer. Some you're manufacturer, you're looking for an importer, right? So different things may apply to you. Then I'm going to go over the labeling and advertising requirements and just basic stuff because I don't want to go into too much detail because it can be quite complicated, but just so you know roughly what is required. Then we'll go into the most common challenging when importing and things that I do see and I've seen that actually hinder the business a lot. And we're going to talk about how to avoid food recalls. And this is very important because we don't want you, to have a product that is pulled from the shelf. It can be very costly. And then lastly, we're going to go into what is coming soon, right? So there's a few regulations that are coming soon. One is the front of pack labeling. We call it FOP labeling for short. And then the other one is the French language law that is coming actually next week, June 1st. So when it comes to the import requirements, can you see my new screen? Import requirements?
No.
No, you don't see it? Okay.
There you go.
There we go. Okay. So now I get it. I get how it works now. So basically, as a manufacturer, right? What you may be in a position where you're the manufacturer and you don't wish to import, but the importers are asking you a lot of questions, right? So what do you need to know as a manufacturer? What do you need to give your importers, right? If they're importing to Canada. So they'll be always asking you for food safety standards. So, in Canada, they want to see that the product is made in a safe manner. The easiest way to show that it's made in a safe manner is to actually have a food safety certification that is internationally recognized. And if you have that, it's basically a certification under the GFSI scheme. So it can be BRC, IQF, it can be FSSC, just different ones, right? If you don't have that, doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It's just a matter of proving to Canadian government, I do have food safety standards that I comply with. And if you can have a third-party audit, that is amazing, right? But just to keep in mind, we have to demonstrate that the food is safe to the Canadian government. Then, when it comes to product-specific requirements, the importer will be asking you for product specification document. What is it? So product specification is just information about the product, right? So what is the product? If there are any ingredients, what are the ingredients? What are the requirements for testing, things like that. And then they're going to be asking you for nutritional information. So when we're making a label for the product in Canada, obviously we want to make sure we know the mandatory information such as calories, protein, sugars, carbohydrate, things like that. And then lastly, to show that the food is safe, you as a manufacturer, you need to do some product testing, right? So when it comes to micro, when it comes to chemical would be more like pesticides, drug residues, things like that. And the product testing is really dependent on the type of product, right? So depending on the type of product, you'll know, for example, chocolate has a usually salmonella issue, right? So, salmonella is a must, right? So each product will be prone to different micro challenges, right? And even chemical challenges. So you're going to see, for example, anything agricultural, usually pesticide issue. Now, moving to the other side, let's say you want to import, right? So what do I need to know as an importer, right? So very important is to get what is called a Safe Food for Canadians import license. It is about $280, and it lasts you 2 years, and then you have to renew again. So it's not an expensive thing, but this is something that you need to have prior to importing, right? Now, as part of the license, you also need to have what is called preventative control plan. We call it PCP for short. And basically, this is a way to show CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, that you actually have food safety systems in place, but also that you're complying with other requirements in Canada when it comes to regulations, compositional regulations, labeling regulations. So this is basically like your way of showing I have a plan in place, this is what I'm following, and I can demonstrate that I'm following it as well. Now, many times, you may be in a position you're like, I'm ready to import, what do I need to know, right? So the most important thing is always check, right? Even, for example, you're already an importer, and there's some certain things you always have to check for each product, because if you don't check that, it may happen the product is not permitted, and if it's not permitted in Canada, you can't sell it. CFIA comes in, they put your product on hold, they say you can only export or you can destroy, right? So we want to make sure you're not in a position where you cannot actually sell the product. It's very costly and it's completely preventable, right? So as an inspector, I was in a situation where, for example, right, is the product permitted? Let's say mustard oil, very popular, right? Mustard oil in Canada is actually not permitted to be sold for internal use, for consumption, because there's a high level of uric acid, which can cause heart issues, right, over a long time. So basically, mustard oil, if somebody's selling it with a nutrition facts table, you cannot sell it, right? So it's going to be basically, CFI inspector may come, they will put your product on hold in your warehouse, and they will not allow you to sell, right? Now, if it's for external use, it's very different, but for consumption, you cannot use. Now, other problems, sometimes it happens, product has non-permitted colors, right? So not all colors are permitted. There is certain ones that are permitted, certain ones that are banned. When it comes to food additives, so what is a food additive? It can be preservative, it can be emulsifier, just different ones. We always want to make sure all food additives are permitted that are in the product. And then when it comes to addition of vitamins and minerals, so not all products are permitted, right? In certain products, you have to add vitamins and minerals. For example, flour, white flour, there's certain vitamins and minerals that have to be added. And the reason for it is because when you're processing white wheat flour, there is a lot of stripping of the nutrients that happens, right? So basically, in Canada, they say, well, we need to add them back into the product. And because most people consume flour, right, any sort of like baked good, then you can actually have those vitamins and minerals, in your diet as well. Now, so that is the most important thing. Is the product permitted? So what happens is, for example, as a CFI inspector, we would get a complaint. So a lot of the things that happen is CFI gets a complaint and they have to action, right? So of course, audit happens, right? Especially like when it comes to, every year or every 2 years, depending on the risk of the products that people are importing. You can be audited once a year, or you can be audited a little bit less often, also depending on how CFI is busy. But you can think about it like this. Many times CFI gets a complaint and they action the complaint, right? So for example, if somebody complains, oh, I've seen mustard oil, or I've seen this product that I know is not permitted because there's problem with the color or additional vitamins, minerals, they're going to complain. The CFI inspector will come to the warehouse and they have to look at what you have, right? If they find a product, then they have to put it on hold because it's a composition issue. You cannot label it, right? You cannot fix it by labeling. You cannot sell it. So they will put it on hold, and what happens, they'll give you two options: export or destroy, right? So if it's a small quantity, many times people say, I'll just destroy. But if it's a large quantity, usually, if it's possible, they like to export. Either way, it's costly. So we want to make sure that portion, we take good care of that. So you don't end up in a situation where you just cancel the product. It's very frustrating, right? Now, we also need to make sure that the food labeling is in place. So Canada has specific labeling requirements. And I just put a mandatory information there so you have an idea of what is required. So for example, mandatory information would be like a product name, let's say rice, right? Rice. Net quantity, let's say 1 kg. Ingredient listing, rice is just rice. So you actually don't need ingredient listing. But let's say you have some sort of a spice mixture, right? So in the spice mixture, you put all the ingredients from the highest amount to the lowest amount. The nutrition facts table is important. Dealer ID, so you can have manufacturer information or importer information, and then the shelf life. Everything, all of this information have to be bilingual as well. Now, when it comes to advertising, we get this question a lot. When it comes to advertising, what can I say? What can I not say? So the way you can think about advertising is really an extension of the label. So whatever is not permitted on the label is not permitted in advertising either. Now, what are the most common challenges that I see? So many times importers, they say, I have everything in place, but I'm not importing directly from manufacturer, right? Now, the problem with that is that if you're not importing from manufacturer as an importer, then you cannot show CFIA, for example, how the product is safe. How can you say, you don't have the food safety certificate, right? Or you don't have a contact with manufacturer. How can you say this particular product I'm importing is actually safe product? Because I can't get any information from manufacturer, right? When it comes to lab testings, right? Usually we get it from the manufacturers, importers, right? So if we cannot get that, yes, you can test in Canada too. So that is a good thing. But especially when it comes to food safety certificates, you want to make sure you're in contact with the manufacturer directly, or you have a good link to the manufacturer, right? So I see that is the most common challenge where, for example, you buy it from an exporter, right? And the exporter is buying from somebody like a distributor, right? And they are not linked to the manufacturer. So it's very, very difficult to figure out, okay, this product actually is coming from a very reputable company. They have a food safety certificates in place. So the product is safe. And of course, if there's any question from the CFI regarding, this nutritional value, show me that the nutritional value is correct. Show me that you have, that there is no salmonella or E. coli issue, right? So it's a little bit more difficult. In some cases, yes, you can test the product here. In some cases, it is a little bit more challenging. Now, I've seen many times, this is the major thing, as I mentioned, with the composition, right, of the product. I want to make sure we check all the ingredients, right? So when I check ingredients, I always look at additives, colors, fortification, right? Is product permitted? This is, I would say, after getting the, the product food safety certificate, right? That's probably the most important thing, because if the product is not permitted in Canada, you can't sell it, right? And if the manufacturer is willing to work around it and be like, okay, I'm going to actually not include this color, or I'm going to change this additive to make sure it's okay, then we can work with the manufacturer. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that there is something called standard container size. So certain products, for certain products, not all products, but certain products like pickled products, they require that there is that the product is packaged in a specific size. For example, 500 grams, it can be 750, one kilogram, but you cannot have, like, let's say 850, right? So it is common for some products, and we have to know which products, and then if it's applicable, then package it in those sizes. The reason why they have the standard container size is to protect Canadian market, right? That's kind of like traditionally why the Canadian regulations put it in place, to make sure that they protect their own market. So they have been removing them slowly, but there's still some that have the standard container size. Now, what happens is the same thing. I've seen inspectors come. I mean, if the product is completely okay, but it just doesn't, it's not packaged in that standard container size. And what happens is that, it gets detained again, right? It's put on hold. You can't sell it. What are you going to do about it, right? And many times, what importers do, they just kind of like sell it to US, for example, right? Or export back home. Now, when it comes to labeling, there's two options you can do. So if you have large enough volumes, you just make Canadian packaging, right? So basically make it Canadian compliant, and off you go. There is an option, especially if, some importers, they have a lot of different SKUs, a lot of different products, and it's like, it's impossible. Like, I can't make a Canadian package. I don't have customers yet. I don't have enough customers, right? So there's an option to apply stickers, so you can actually apply label stickers to make the product compliant to the Canadian regulations, and that works quite well as well. Now, one of the things is food recalls. Food recalls are is something that obviously everybody wants to avoid, right? Like, we never want to go through a food recall. Now, what is a food recall? It's basically you're basically pulling your product off the store shelves because it's unsafe, right? So that is the essentially the essence of what it is. There's 3 different types of food recall classes in Canada: class 1, 2, and 3. Now, I'm not going to go into detail. CFA actually determines if it's class 1, 2, or 3, depending on how, the impact, right? So, for example, if you find like a sharp metal piece inside a food, right, they're going to go public. They're going to make a public announcement. They're going to say, it's a class 1 to consumer. We're going to make a public announcement because we want to make sure that every single person that bought a product that is, this particular product, is able to not consume it, right? So versus you can have a product that it's still unsafe, but it's not in such a serious matter, right? So the reason I'm mentioning it is because with class 1, if it goes to TV and radio, nobody wants that, right? As a manufacturer, as an importer especially, you don't want your name to be on TV because you have a recall on your hands, right? So the food recalls are quite costly. They do affect companies' reputation. There's, of course, cost because, for example, if there's, for example, metal or glass or something that is found in the product, obviously you can't sell the product, right? You have to investigate at a manufacturer, like, what happened, right? As a manufacturer, you need to investigate what happened. There was a malfunctioning of equipment, something fell in, like, is it just one batch that is affected? Are there multiple batches that are affected, right? But definitely there's a cost to that. Now, there's type of food recall that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Is basically a food recall where a food allergen is not declared, right? So if you have a food allergen that is not declared and it needs to be declared, you can always pull the product from the store shelves, and then you can relabel, right? Relabel and then put it back on. So in that case, you can lower the cost, but still, You have to basically pull everything, remove everything from the store shelves and then correct it. Now, some big retailers, they actually do fine companies, right? So sometimes what happens, importers, they say, I kind of rather sell to smaller retailers because I know, yes, it's unfortunate. There is a cost, for the recall, but at the same time, at least I'm not fined. Versus the big retailers in Canada, they will fine you because all of a sudden there's an empty shelf. They don't want to have an empty shelf, right? So they will actually find people which companies, which is something to know, because you don't want to be surprised, right? If you go into, like, let's say Sobeys or Metro or Walmart, and all of a sudden you're like, why am I fined, right? I already have so much cost with the recall. Now, there's different reasons why a recall can happen. Usually it's either physical contamination. So let's say there's a glass, there's a metal piece, there's something in the product that's not supposed to be there, and it actually can harm a person. It can be a chemical. So for example, it's unsafe. There's unsafe level of pesticides, or there's veterinary drugs found in the product, right? Things like that at unacceptable levels. You can have a micro issue is a very common one. So when it comes to pathogens like E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, so many times the lettuces, salads had a lot of recalls, actually coming from US mostly. I was just searching the website yesterday, and recently it's the pumpkin seeds. The pumpkin seeds, I believe, they have been recalled as well. So it's just different micro issues, and of course undeclared allergens, right? Now, what are the allergens in Canada? So on the right, you're gonna see a list. So there's a long list, and including the mustard. So mustard seed is actually a high priority allergen in Canada. And what is interesting about recalls when it comes to undeclared allergens is that there's between 21 to 38% of recalls within the last 5 years have been due to undeclared allergens, right? This one is completely avoidable, right? So if we know that the product contains, let's say mustard, let's say in spices there's a mustard, we declare it on the label, right? You don't have to go through a recall, right? So many times people don't realize there is something that I need to declare on the label. They just somehow miss it, and you end up in a recall, which is totally avoidable. So this is just a heads up. This happens, quite often. I had just to give a little bit of story. I had a case with the mustard, right? Especially when it comes to Indian cuisines and the Middle Eastern cuisines. A lot of spices contain mustard, right? And the company was making the product, right? Everything looked good. They were super proud of it. And I'm like looking at these spices that are using. It's like, it is a mustard. Oh no, right? So, and then of course it ended up in a recall, unfortunately, because it wasn't labeled, right? So this is, I find this especially, especially recently, because mustard was actually added recently to high priority allergens, probably within last, I want to say 10 years, 8 years probably. So it's something that people are, may not be still too familiar. Now, peanuts, most people are aware. Peanuts is a very well-known high priority allergen, and the other ones make sense as well. Now, there's some regulations, some rules that are coming to play very soon, and then basically what's happening is, like, we have the two products here. So what happens is, if you have a product that can be high in saturated fat, sugar, or sodium, the government of Canada said, we are going to make change where you actually have to highlight that on the front packaging. So over here on the right, you see that there is this, the symbol, right? So for example, for a popcorn, we're going to have, for example, high in sodium. So all of a sudden they have to say high in sodium. For juice, it's going to be high in sugar, right? So they're going to have a high in sugar kind of label right on the front. Now, this regulation is actually coming up next year, January 2026. And basically it says, if your product has a high content of either one of these three, then you have to label it. And typically what means that is high in, for example, sugar, means you have at least 15% daily value of sugar in the nutrition facts table. For smaller sizes, let's say if it's like a 30 gram or smaller serving size, then it's basically the cutoff is 10% daily value. Just so you know, this is what's happening. And a lot of countries, they do have these type of symbols. somewhat different, but Canada is implementing it in line with global, what is happening globally right now. And then lastly, so this is kind of interesting one. So we have this Bill 96. This is a new regulation that is coming in Quebec only. So in Canada, we have federal regulations, and then specifically the province of Quebec has this new regulation coming into play. So if you're not interested to import to Quebec, right, so sell in Quebec, you don't have to worry about this particular Bill 96. But if you would like to make sure that all your products you're able to sell them anywhere in Canada, and I do recommend that you kind of like label them to make sure you can sell them anywhere, because many times, you have a customer in Quebec, they're super interested in your product, but then all of a sudden, by the way, I can't sell you because I don't fully comply with this bill, right? So it's not that difficult to comply, especially if you're making a Canadian packaging. Very simple. Basically, what it says is all the information has to be declared in French. So any information that is presented on the label, not just mandatory information, but any information has to be in French as well. For the rest of Canada, you're only talking bilingual, like mandatory information, right? So when I was talking about, let's say, product name, nutrition facts table, ingredient listing, that information has to be bilingual. But in Quebec, anything that you say, even if you just talk about your company, how you got started, you have to put it in French now, right? Now, the marketing information must be predominant in French. That's their requirement as well. The brand names, we get a lot of questions about brand names. If they're trademarked, the trademark is actually registered with the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, CIPO. You actually don't have to worry about translating them, even if it's like a pending registration. So typically, you don't have to translate. Now, there's also recognized trademarks which are not registered, but they're kind of like very well known and very well like recognized. So they actually seems to be exempted from translation as well. Now, the key is, many times the brand name, for example, if there's no English word to it, right? It's just kind of like something catchy, right? Or something that doesn't have like a specific like English connotation. Usually it should be okay. But for example, if somebody says, the best food, or a quality food or something, typically they like to have it translated. Now, who is enforcing this? This is the interesting part. So this particular law it's not enforced by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, right? Or it's not supposed to be. It's actually enforced by the Office Québécois de la langue française. So it's basically French language police, if you will. And they are the ones that put this bill forth, and they're the ones that are enforcing it as well. And we haven't, so this bill is coming up this June, so next week. We haven't seen the enforcement yet, so we're going to see how they're handling it. We know that the companies have been already threatened. There's going to be fines involved, things like that, if they're not complying. And we just going to have to wait and see how stringent they are. In general, when the CFIA is enforcing, if you're a new importer, there's certain things that they cannot close their eyes towards, right? But like, for example, like first time they meet you first time, you have no idea what's going on. You just want to import food. Many times what happens, they're like, okay, we'll give you a little bit of education, right? We'll work with you to make you compliant. So we're not going to be super, super strict. Certain things like composition, if there is an issue with, you're having non-permitted colors, things like that, they cannot close their eyes. They have to basically detain the product. And that's why I kind of stress the composition is super, super important. Now, CFIA is getting more and more stricter. When I was with CFIA, there was still like kind of like that education approach at the beginning, and then slowly as you kind of get to know the rules more and more, there's a higher and higher expectation, right, that you're supposed to be compliant. And of course, the more non-compliant companies are, then we have to be stricter with them, right? Especially when they're not listening, right? So, but with this new law, Bill 96, that is coming up, we'll see how it plays out. We don't know yet how strict they'll be. I've already seen that when it comes to store signage and intranet websites and whatnot, there has been some things already in the news regarding fines and whatnot. So this is something that I feel is going to be more stricter when it comes to enforcement, but we'll see how it's going to play out. So now I'm ready for any questions, any questions you may have.
Thank you, Katrina. I think the first question, Mehboob, you had your hand up, so I'll let you ask your question, please.
Right. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Katrina, thank you very much. And thanks, Zohaib Altamash, for this so insightful presentation. Katrina, I would circle back to what you have mentioned about, at the first place, the ingredients and the stuff which we see on day-to-day basis on the shelves.
Yeah.
So the question is that how come a thing, or like a product is could be placed on shelves uh, without inspecting the ingredients at the first place. And like you mentioned about mustard oil, I have some couple of other examples, especially with some color dyes and other stuff. So my question is that how diligent is CFIA in first place that that product reach to the shelves, with so many,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
There's a good
you know what
question.
I mean, right?
I know what you mean. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know exactly what you mean. And we got that question a lot when I was at a CFIA too. So so my answer to you is this. There's so many different products coming to Canada. There's no way CFI can check everything. So the way
Mm,
CFI inspects is there's a complaint-based system, right? They also do border inspection. So they actually are going to target or they're going to pull certain shipments to do inspections, random inspections, but they cannot pull every single container that comes in. Also, you don't want that, because if you are going to have your container pulled every single time, that is also a cost to you as an importer, right? Like if you're an importer. Because what happens is they have to pull it aside. If they find something and they need to, for example, have so typically CBSA, Canada Border Agency, they pull it over. They already know some rules. We trained them
mm,
over the years. They kind of know. Look at this. This is the list of permitted colors. If you see a color that is not permitted, flag it, right, for us. So they already know certain things to look out for, and then they ask CFI to come in. Now, CFI come in, if they have inspected it, can come in the same day, great. If they can't, imagine this, your product, your shipment is put on hold, and is basically, you're going to be charged overnight by the bonded warehouse for the storage costs, right? So you don't want every single shipment to be inspected, because it actually adds a lot of cost to it, right? So imagine there's like a lot of influx of foods. There's not enough inspectors to inspect everything. They're putting onus on the importer to make sure that they're compliant with the regulations. Now, if the importer is not, for example, they don't have a PCP, the preventative control plan, right? They don't follow the rules. They should have the license, the import license, right? Otherwise, they can't import. But if they are not compliant, the CFIA can say, actually, you're not complying with the regulations. You may have PCP plan, but you're actually not following it. Show us how you're going to correct what you're doing. Otherwise, we're going to take away your import license. This is something that is so interesting, because in the past, there was certain import license that you needed if it's like a high risk product. Let's say if you import meat or fish or dairy, right? You would have to have certain licenses and certain safety certificates you have to have when you import. But now, I believe it started in 2019. Now you have to have this import license, and if you don't comply, CFI can actually basically tell you, if you're not complying with Canadian regulations, we're actually going to take away your license so you can't import. So now many food importers, they know, now I have to comply, because if I don't, then I'm actually risking my business, right? I can't function. So I cannot run my business. So to answer your question in a different way, CFIA is basically putting all the onus on the companies. They inspect, so they cannot, there's no way they can actually inspect every shipment.
mm.
They cannot have somebody to kind of inspect every single thing. For meat, they do. So for meat, it's such a high risk, commodity. They have to have a certain presence, certain number of hours, and during production of meat, they have to have inspector on site to make sure that is okay. But yeah, but I would say many times you may have importers and they'd be like, oh, I've never been inspected by CFIA yet, right? Or I've never had issue like this, right? And they continue bringing in non-compliant products. The problem is, at some point it catches up to them, and then they may incur quite a high cost because they can't sell a certain product.
Right. No, no, thank you very much. It was very helpful. And one follow-up question, if you allow me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So the next thing is, when we look globally, with the food products and labeling, and for example, like recently, USFDA, they
Yeah.
have banned some colors and some chemicals in the food, and so much as in Europe, in Japan, like rest of the world. My question is that how vigilant CFIA, and then what is the coordination between Health Canada
Mhm.
and CFIA, in keeping an eye on these uh, food bans or the updates?
So in Canada, what happens is Health Canada makes the regulations and CFI enforces the regulations. So that's why, for example, you'll see even on this front of pack label, you'll see Health Canada here. Share with me. You'll see Health Canada, because actually Health Canada made that rule, right? That we want this kind of symbol on.
Exactly. And that's the reason because I asked this question, because about the daily requirements and all those things, it's only Health Canada who can approve.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So Health Canada, basically they set the rules and they use CFI for the enforcement of the rules. So Health Canada actually both Health Canada and CFI, they are in touch with for example FDA in US and other regulatory agencies in other countries. And they usually, the CFI specifically is in touch with the other regulatory agencies because they want to know the recalls that are happening. So let's say if there's a recall in US, US actually FDA and also USDA, they tell them, okay, this is a recall that is happening. If you have any products coming into your country, you should look into that, right? So they already are in communication. When it comes to the rules, there has been, because US made changes to the regulations, not even just now, but even like over time, they've been making changes, and Canada is aware of that, and it's kind of, it almost seemed like they were working towards making it more synchronized, but then it's still different. So let's say when you look at the nutrition facts table, US changed their nutrition facts table. It looks different from what it looked like before. Canada also followed suit and they made it different, but the problem is it's still not the same.
True.
So the way they calculate percent daily values is different, the way it looks is different, and it's not like with the nutrition facts table, you can just say, oh, if it's close enough, it's good, No, you have to follow technical requirements, the thickness of lines, like how the information is presented is like template, Many times we get a question, and I was getting questions as inspector. My major market is in US. I have some market in Canada, but major US. Can I make one label for both US and Canada? And I don't mind putting the French on, but is it possible? And in general, yes, you can accept the nutrition facts table, which I find it so interesting. It's like the one thing that you just basically have to put a sticker pretty much, right? If you make a US label, everything is English, French, and even Spanish usually many times. And then all of a sudden, like just the one thing you have to put a nutrition facts table that is Canadian format. So so to answer your question, yes, Health Canada and CFI, they actually in contact with other agencies, global agencies. Unfortunately, they're not able to get synchronized just yet. So I don't know if it's going to happen in the future. But even like I was at a conference in the fall, and it was so interesting because there was a lot of industry initiatives that they are trying to figure out, okay, what are the global requirements, in different countries? Is there a way that we can, work towards some sort of synchronization? Because, we're all humans at the end of the day, right? So the percent daily values, for example, should be calculated in, it would be a good idea to calculate it in the same way. It's just there's not, there's even through the communication, we are still not at a point where it will be, similar or the same requirements.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Aljan Shaikh?
Thank you so much, Katrina. I think we have been doing this for 1 year now, but I think this was the highlight of 1 year for us. In 30 minutes, you have summed up everything that we wanted our exporters to know from Pakistan. So thank you so much for this very precise but so effective talk. Thank you so much. And it just begs me, like, because this video will be recorded and we'll be sharing this for all our exporters. How do they approach you and get your services of your agency?
Yes. So basically, if I just go back to the last slide, so they can approach us. Either they can directly email me, or we have also info at CFC agency. .ca email as well. I added my phone number there as well. So if somebody's already in Canada, it's easier for them to reach out, or even like on WhatsApp. I know many times we have clients that they prefer WhatsApp. It's, especially, a call is faster than email many times, right? Or they just want to share, I have a question, I'm not sure, like just point me in the right direction. And of course, we also have a website here as well. So so this is the best way to contact us.
Thank you so much. I had two questions for my exporters, and very brief questions. Number one, you said some food safety standards, right, which the manufacturer from Pakistan, for example, should have. Can you again just name those few certifications that they need to have? The best, and the best one for Canadian market, like the most acknowledged here.
Yes. So basically, any international food safety certificate under the what do you call GFSI scheme is acceptable. So, for example, it can be SQF, it can be BRC, it can be FSSC. So with the FSSC, there is like one that is for food safety, one is for quality. So the one that you really want is the food safety. Because many times actually we had cases where CFI is doing an audit and we have FSSC 22,000, like we have those certificates, and they're looking, but hold on, this is a quality one, this is not food safety. Like, it's great that you have the quality one too, but we actually need to look at the food safety. This is kind of like our priority. So just to kind of be aware to always make sure you have the food safety one. IFS as well, there's another one too, but honestly there's it's not like one is better than the other. It's more so whatever you feel comfortable with, right? So whatever suits your products as well. It's just a matter of like, if you have that international certificate, it's just so much easier to do an audit, for example, in Canada, because like CFI looks at it, oh, you have these international certificates, great. They still tell you, it's great that you have them, but these international certificates are global, right? So see, Canada has their own specific requirements for certain products. So you still have to kind of like know, I need to follow Canadian regulations, and they ask, how do you follow the Canadian regulations, right? Certain standards, for example, Canada has certain levels of, like say, heavy metals or whatnot that is permitted. Like, how do you make sure that you follow Canadian standard, right? So certain things they can still ask a few more questions, but it just makes the audit so much easier if manufacturer has those certificates. Now, if they don't, it's not, as I said, it's not the end of the world. They may have, for example, a system in place. Ideally, they're going to be audited by a third party, by somebody else, right? So let's say if it's a HACCP system, right? So they follow a HACCP system and somebody audits them. It's like, okay, somebody actually looked at the system. They identify maybe there's some gaps, just correct them. Or if there are no gaps, great. But somebody else other than the company is looking at it, right? Now, if they don't have that in place, we always kind of work with the company and kind of see, is there a way that we can qualify them, right? So we look at certain things that Canada requires. Is there a way? Obviously, we're not there, so it's a little bit tougher. But we have done, in certain cases, we're able to pull certain information and satisfy CFI as well. But the best way is to have that international certificate. I know it comes at a cost as well. So small manufacturers are going to have issue with that, and that's given. So basically just kind of, case by case, what can you do? Can you put some sort of a HACCP system in place and just follow it, right? So we can actually share it with the CFIA.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Second question was just again, very briefly, you said product testing.
Yes.
So when would the product be tested, and are there any, again, best places for Canadians, testing? What do you do? How do you do that?
Yeah. So when we work with importers, we always try to make sure we keep the cost as low as possible. So we always ask, if it's possible, because usually all the manufacturers, they test their product, right? And so if it's possible, get the testing from manufacturer, right? So let's say certain product, and based on the hazard, so there's like a hazard analysis that needs to be part of the preventative control plan. But let's say based on the hazard analysis, you analyze and you say, okay, I'm importing, this product, and these are the hazards. Usually, maybe E. coli, salmonella. There's the pesticide residues. Those are the risks, right, with this type of product. So then, typically the manufacturer is an expert, to be honest, right? They know this is the issue. They need to test for these things. So if we can get the lab report from them, that is the ideal case. So, and this is something that manufacturers need to know as well. You will be asked, lab reports, right? So this is not something that is surprising. It can be part of an audit, or it can be part of annual verification, like depending on how often the importer is checking certain things, right? Now in Canada, if for example you choose to test in Canada, there's accredited labs, right? So there's basically different ones. Like us as a company, we use Gelda Labs in Mississauga, which is close to Toronto, but there's so many different ones. Silica, there's just like a lot of different ones. As long as it's accredited lab, that's the most important thing, because that means that it's recognized. It actually has accreditation to do this, and it kind of adds to the credibility of the test, right? Now, manufacturer, they may ask, can I do in-house testing, right? Many times we see in-house testing. In-house testing, it can be okay, but it's always more credible if you have the test done at a lab. Let's say even if it's back home in Pakistan, right? So just to make sure, like because in-house testing, what if your equipment is not calibrated properly, right? Or when something is not right, right? Or basically you just you never know. Actually, like when I was an inspector, and I was actually supervising at a time, we had a company, and what happened was they had no idea, but somebody in the manufacturing side, they were not cleaning properly. They were just like forging like documentation, batch codes, and they were just saying, yeah, everything was clean, and they just kind of like, they just put the paperwork in, but it wasn't done. There was a big food recall because there was a milk residue in the product, and many products actually received. It was kind of like like some sort of a mixture, like a spice mix with something, and there was a little bit of milk contamination. But the problem was it was such high levels. We're like, this is something really wrong. There's something really wrong with the product, and a lot of like this product was distributed to a lot of manufacturers in Canada for use. So imagine the amount of recall, because then all of the products that were using this spice mix actually had that. So the company actually was so interesting. They actually flew in because they wanted to have in-person meeting. They didn't want to even have like a in person. So they wanted to do it like over email or something, and they had no idea. Right? So what I'm trying to say is in Pakistan as well, right? Like the manufacturer, like make sure that if you're doing the cleaning, like you actually clean, right? And you follow your procedures. And you have somebody, like you're using outside lab to test as well, because if there's something wrong, you're gonna figure it out, right? Rather than somebody just gonna say, yes, we tested and this is good.
Makes sense. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Katrina, I have a question. You mentioned that like the FDA speaks to Health Canada and like the American agencies speak to Canadian agencies. So I want to clarify, is it possible, because we have exporters sending both to US and Canada, sometimes because of like, the reputation Canada being lenient, people can actually kind of like, miss out on some things. Now, is there a possibility that if a product is recalled in US, for example, XYZ brand gets recalled in US, will that information be shared in Canada as well for that specific brand as well? Like how often does that happen?
Yeah. So the US FDA, they would actually if they there's a recall and they kind of know that there may be other companies like also like Canada may be impacted, they will share that information. So CFIA, they also check for any sort of updates on their sites, because everything is public. Once the recall is public, you have the access to that information. But many times the US actually will communicate. It's going to be happening in Ottawa. So it's not, and basically from those headquarter to headquarter communication, they will kind of put the information out. Especially there have been recalls where it's almost like a public announcement. So this is so interesting. Typically, you as a company importer, you initiate a recall, right? So let's say you figure out, okay, there is something wrong with the product. Imagine this. As a recall, what happens is there can be a complaint. So there can be a consumer complaint, somebody gets sick. Now, all of a sudden, CFI gets contacted by the consumer. I got sick, I ate this, and I'm sick, and I'm pretty sure this is the product. So CFI basically looks into that particular product, but they also look at other products potentially, right? Because they have to figure out like what made you sick, right? Let's say they identify this is a product, you need to recall this. And let's say there's not just one batch, but let's say 3 batches affected, right? So now you as a company, you're going to actually do voluntary recall. So you initiate a recall. So you're going to be contacting your stores, for example, where you sold the product, or distributors, right? And try to pull everything from the store shelf. Now, it can happen that there is a product, let's say from US or from somewhere else, and they don't know who imported it. Like, they just know there's a product and there's a risk to the public, right? And there can be not just one importer, because they can maybe find 1 or 2 importers, but let's say there's 5 or 10 importers. So sometimes the CFI, what they'll do is they make a public announcement. This is the product, right? And they may or they may not actually say which importers, because especially if there's like a lot of importers, what is the point? Who imported it? Like, you need to make sure you don't consume that product, right? And they're trying to pull that out, but it's a little bit trickier. But it happens where, we cannot identify all importers, so they just gonna make that public announcement.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
In fact, I have one other question regarding Bill 96. So as you said, it's going to be enforced starting June 1st. Is it going to be enforced for the whole of Canada only, or only in Quebec?
Only in Quebec. Only in Quebec.
Only in Quebec. Okay.
Yeah, and this is so interesting.
If some company is not selling in Quebec, then they don't need to be worried about it?
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to worry about it. And so a lot of the times we have clients where they import foods. Let's say it's a snack food, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lot of languages, especially from European countries. You have a lot of languages, right? And all of a sudden they're like, well, how am I going to? I cannot translate all of that. Like, there's no way I can translate all of that, right? So sometimes companies are making a decision like, should I continue selling to Quebec, or should I just stop, right? Because I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to be basically fined, right? If I don't fully comply. And it is difficult, because almost like it forces some companies to put like a white label over the actual label, because with the mandatory information, a lot of companies are already struggling to put stickers right everywhere.
Yeah.
If you cannot make the Canadian packaging, if you can manage, that's great. But many times, if it's especially as a smaller importer, right, or manufacturer is basically selling some products to import, but it's not like a high volume yet. It is tricky to make a Canadian packaging yet, right? So usually people sticker it into compliance, but now with all that information that needs to be translated, they're like, is it worth it? Like, I'm pretty much basically putting a blank, like I have to cover the entire product, right?
Yeah.
And just put the information that is mandatory, really, because I'm not going to put anything else if I don't have to. So that's the tricky part. Is like, a lot of, I foresee that there's going to be not a lot of products that are going to be, not as many products are going to be sold in Quebec, like the imported products.
Yeah.
Because a lot of importers will say, I cannot make, fully bilingual label, or like basically like make sure that everything is in French, that is in any other language, let's say in Pakistan language, right? All of a sudden you have to translate it to French. You don't have to translate to English, but you have to translate to French, right?
Yeah.
So some I think there's going to be less variety in the stores. One of our clients, actually, he brought up a really interesting issue. He said, well, there's a lot of communities, let's say in Montreal, a lot of Middle Eastern communities in Montreal, right? So all of a sudden they will not be able to purchase their own food, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you want to purchase the food from your own country, right? Like,
yeah.
The quality, the taste, everything like that. So, he was actually saying, like, he was just kind of bringing it up, like, is that some sort of a discrimination in a sense? Because there's all of a sudden you cannot purchase your own products, like, you don't have access to it anymore.
Exactly.
So
makes sense.
you have to go to Ontario. You have to cross the Ontario border to actually be able to purchase what you want to eat, right? So I don't know. It's very tricky. It's very tricky for sure. But to answer your question, if you're not selling in Quebec, you don't have to worry about this Bill 96.
Thank you so much. I think that's clear.
Katrina, quick question. What happens if, because now we have Amazon selling food products, spices and everything. What happens if somebody is selling it on e-commerce and somebody from Montreal is ordering online? How are they checking that part?
Yeah. So, and this is a really good point. We actually had issue when I was with CFI issues where, for example, Amazon in US, right? Amazon in US, somebody purchased something from Amazon US, not Canada. CFI doesn't have jurisdiction over US, right? So, for example, if I, as a customer, I purchase something in US and I bring it over, that's on me, it has nothing to do with Canadian government. I did not purchase something from Canadian side, from US side. The same thing with Quebec. So let's say I'm in Quebec and I decide to purchase something. And let's say on the e-commerce, let's say the company says, these products are for, and not for sale in Quebec, right? Like basically, like, because honestly, like as a company, you can make disclaimers, like how are you going to prevent? How are you going to prevent from somebody purchasing it, right? You're not going to block. You're like, okay, I'm gonna be checking all the addresses. Where is the product going, right? it's intense. So many times, what companies may do, on their e-commerce, they can say, not for sale, to Quebec residents, let's say. And if the Quebec resident chooses to purchase, it's on them, really. They should not be complaining because it's not meant for Quebec, right? And unfortunately, I think this is probably what's going to happen because, people want variety, people want certain products, and those people usually are not going to go and complain to the language police, right? Oh, by the way, this is not fully bilingual. Well, it was not meant for a province of Quebec, right? So you made the decision. You took a risk, you're not supposed to be purchasing it. And honestly, like it's such a tricky thing because, on one hand, you want people to have access to the products, right? On the other hand, you as an importer, you also have to protect yourself.
So in short, just a complaint away from being shut down there. If a complaint comes in, manufacturers are just one complaint away if they're actually gambling on this.
Yeah. And honestly, like with this Bill 96, we're going to see how it's going to play out. We're going to see how strict they are when it comes to enforcement. So I'm kind of curious, like my understanding is they're actually stricter than CFIA when it comes to this, because so this is an interesting point is if you are non-compliant, let's say the composition I mentioned, right? Let's say the composition is, you cannot sell the product in Canada. You're going to incur costs because, for example, export or destruction or whatnot. But CFI is not actually fining you. There's no like addition fine on top of that, right? So it's definitely like I don't advise not being compliant because you're going to incur a lot of costs. But CFI is not fining you versus the language police. They're actually going to fine people, right? So they're not going to be just saying, remove this banner or, you make your label compliant or whatnot. They're going to be like, no, we're actually fining you because you're not complying with the law. And I do believe CFIA is moving in that direction as well. They do want to impose fines. We're just not there yet.
Makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions before we wrap up this very valuable session? I think with no other questions, I think we can wrap this up. Ultimate Bhai, any last words before I
No,
close
I just
this
wanted
off?
to thank Katrina again once. Thank you so much. And if you will be getting questions from us from now on for sure, because you are the expert. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Honestly, it's been a pleasure being here and answering your questions. Very, very valuable. And I do understand like where you're coming from as well, because every country has their own requirements, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you as a manufacturer, let's say, you need to be like aware, okay, this is what US wants, this is what Canada wants, this is what other countries want. And it's just almost like creating like a sheet, like differences, right? And it can be kind of confusing sometimes, but I hope, it was clear and to the point. So it's easy. Easy to follow.
It was amazing. Thank you so much.
No, absolutely, Katrina. Thank you so much. I'm very glad we got to meet at Sial and do this session, because after a successful trade show, now the Pakistani buyers are getting into meetings with the Canadian buyers. So it's very timely and very valuable for them to actually know about all the upcoming changes, especially with some, as you mentioned, some strictness coming into the food inspection space. So thank you so much. This one definitely goes into our archives.
So if you don't mind, I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. I've just missed my my calendar. I just joined this meeting. If you allow me to give me one small question, if you guys have time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Katrina. I mean, I'm an importer of rice from Pakistan, and then the last time I have an issue with the CBSA.
Mhm.
They hold our container because we import for a new company. I mean, I've been using my old company for last 10 years.
Yeah.
I had no issue, but I mean, we import last container of rice with a different company name, and they hold us our container and then charge us like $1,200 to $1,500, which is like close to our margin, about a 3% of my cost. Do you have any suggestion to to deal with CBSA? That, I mean, that was I'm not saying that's a fake charges, but because the company was quite new, and then they hold my container and then they charge us like.
So,
And can I ask, do
so
you know why they hold it? Like, was it that did you have a SFC license, for example?
No, we have all kind of license, but I was told by my agent that because your company is fairly new, and they suspect that they should be on hold. I mean, they release the container after a few days, but they give us they charge us.
That's
which
right.
is-
Yeah. So this is what's happening. So CBSA, they have a right to pull containers. So they want to inspect. They have a right to do that. Now, ideally, they would be faster, but the problem is like you can't prevent them from checking, right? You're just hoping that they're not going to be checking yours, or not very often.
Mhm.
And if they do find issue once, they're going to be flagging your shipment. So the thing is, if they didn't find anything wrong, you were a newer company, they should not be flagging you next time. So you should be, the good news is you should be getting less inspection.
Mhm.
Now, the tricky part, especially with the companies and importers, is they want you as an importer, you would like to figure out what is wrong, like why are you holding it for so long, right? Like, and honestly, many times it's just they don't have inspector right away to go and check, right? So there may not be like a real issue.
Yeah, that's the point. I mean, I know that that's their job, but it costs us like 2-3% of cost. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can request a CBSA that make it? I mean, if they want to do it, but they don't have to charge that much of amount. I mean, I
so
lose my margin.
Moin sab, very good question, Katrina. I think because this is a very custom requirement, so I'll actually let you take this offline. Moin sab, I will share the information. You have this information here. So if you want to take it offline, because obviously there's more details to be discussed. So
Yeah, and I
this
agree. I
is
agree. I was late to join this meeting. I think the time is over.
yeah.
So I'm okay.
No, I want to
Okay,
be
there.
respectful for everyone's time. So, but great question. But because of the nature, I recommend that we actually take this offline.
All right. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you, Katrina. These are the things that you will be hearing from us, and some of the importance as well. So definitely one for the archives. And actually, Altamash bhai, I see that you
Yeah,
have
I
something to
think
say.
he actually Moin Saab raised a very good question for new exporters from Pakistan. Do you think, Katrina, that if we have all the certifications like the ones that you talked about, if the importer has them and displays them upfront, even if they are new, would the CBSA be more comfortable with that?
So they don't look at the certificates.
Okay.
So
So it doesn't
basically,
matter. Yeah.
when it comes to an audit, the CFI, when the audit comes, CFI will be asking for it.
Yeah.
But CBSA don't look at it. So what CBSA looks at is there any composition issue? So they have sheets of permitted colors. They have certain things they need to look out for because those are common issues. So they know, okay, we need to check this, but they don't look at certificates. It's not
Makes sense.
something they look at. No.
Okay, so it's totally random.
And you can't prevent them from doing the inspection either.
I totally understood.
It's
Yeah,
just that
totally
you want to
understood.
make sure they don't find anything, so you are not going to be inspected again.
Yeah,
Right?
makes sense. No, I think
Sorry, if you can raise a question with the concerned people that they should not charge, because some of the product they're not like the market is very thin. I mean, we're playing like 7 or 8%.
Moita, we can take this offline because Madam Katrina is not with CBSA. I think that's CBSA's job. So we'll take that offline.
Yeah. This would be CBSA, and so typically I don't believe CBSA charges. It is the warehouse where they do the inspection.
Exactly.
So it's the warehouse cost. It's not the CBSA.
Makes sense.
My understanding is.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely. And Moitab, my recommendation, the information is right here on the screen. So I assume you're in Canada. So if you want to give her a call right after this meeting, that would be helpful for you as well. And then definitely can take this matter further. But that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Katrina, I will be sharing your information with your permission after this session with the recording. And we hope to actually stay connected, and with any questions, we'll definitely come up to you, and happy to help any Pakistani exporters, any diaspora importers here in Canada as well. So thank you everyone for your time, and have a wonderful day. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye-bye.